Welcome to Keto Meals and Recipes.com. If you love cinnamon buns and you also love cookies, I'm sure that you will love these amazing cinnamon roll cookies that are keto, sugar-free, and gluten-free, as all of my recipes are. And what I love most about these cookies is that the macronutrient ratio is 4.2 to 1, with 2.2 total carbs, 0.8 grams of soluble fiber, 0.6 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in only 0.8 grams of net carbs per cookie. I begin all of my recipes by first assembling my ingredients and weigh the correct amount for each ingredient. The first thing I'm going to do is start by making the cookie dough. In a large mixing bowl, add and combine the unsalted butter and your granulated sweetener. Then beat until the butter is at a light, fluffy stage. Next, drop in your whisked eggs and vanilla. And while you're beating, remember to stop and scrape the bowl, both sides and bottom, to ensure that the butter has been integrated with all the ingredients you've added. Now, place a fine mesh sieve over the mixing bowl and drop in all the dry ingredients. The almond flour, the coconut flour, the unsweetened and unflavored whey protein isolate powder, the glucomannan, which is also called konjac root powder, which I use as a binding agent in place of gluten, the gluten-free baking powder, and salt, which I ground to a very fine powder. Then, using a whisk or your fingers, stir to sift all the ingredients through the sieve. After sifting the dry ingredients into your bowl, beat to combine the dry ingredients with the butter mixture. You'll notice that the dough is granulated at this point, so just scoop it up and use your hands to fold into a dough ball. I'm now going to weigh my dough and divide the dough into 2 equal halves. I'm going to start with 1/2 of my dough, which I'm going to place between 2 sheets of parchment paper. Here's a little trick I'd like to share with you. To ensure that the dough will be the right thickness, I'm going to use 2 painter sticks as a thickness guide. And you can get these if you ask nicely from most paint departments. Then just roll the dough until it's about 1/8 inch or 0.3 centimeters thick. While you're rolling, you may have to trim the dough to even it out and make it into a rectangle. And the final shape that I'm looking for is a rectangle that is a 12 by 10 inch or 30 by 25 centimeter rectangle. Having done that, I notice that my dough is very soft at this point. So I'm going to get a hold of the parchment paper with the rolled out cookie dough and transfer it to a tray and place it in my refrigerator for 30 minutes. This will help the dough to get a little bit harder and easier to work with. And while the dough is chilling, I have time to make 2 batches of cinnamon sweetener for the filler. I prefer to do 2 batches as opposed to 1 and then trying to divide it. In a small bowl, add half the sweetener and half the cinnamon powder. Then just stir to combine and repeat the same process in the second bowl. By using the 2-bowl method, you're going to ensure that you have the exact amount for each batch of cookies. Now that the dough has had time to chill, I'm going to take it out of the refrigerator and then peel off the top sheet of parchment. The next step is to simply use your pastry brush and distribute half of the melted butter over the entire surface of your cookie dough. And finally, sprinkle the cinnamon sweetener you just made as evenly as possible over the entire surface. Now, get a hold of the bottom sheet of parchment paper along the length of the roll and carefully and tightly roll the dough into a nice log. After you've finished rolling, rewrap the dough in the parchment and place in the freezer for 10 minutes. Now that the dough is nice and firm, I'm going to cut the log into 1/4 inch or 0.6 centimeter thick medallions. And after each cut, I place the cut cookie medallion on a parchment-lined baking sheet. These cookies won't spread very much, but do leave space between the medallions. The next step I'm going to show you is optional, but I highly recommend it. First, get a small rectangle of parchment and butter one side. Then place the butter side on top of the cookie. Then using a glass with a flat bottom, press down gently to flatten a little bit. Alternatively, you could use the palm of your hand because the heat placed on top of the cookie, pressing down gently, will create a really nice shape. Either of these two ways work really well. To flatten the cookies, you can use whichever method you prefer. Regardless of which method you're using, make sure that when you're flattening the cookies, they are all about the same thickness. When you have completed cutting up all the medallions, transfer the tray into the middle position of your 300 Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius preheated oven and set the timer for exactly 10 minutes. And please don't be tempted to bake any longer. At the 10-minute mark, the cookies will be very pale and soft. That's exactly perfect. At this point, remove the tray from the oven and leave the cookies to cool in the cookie sheet. You want them to harden up. You don't want to transfer them when they're soft because they'll crack. After your cookies have cooled a bit, use a metal spatula to transfer the fragile cookies and place them onto a cooling rack to rest and cool to room temperature. You still have a second half of the dough, so repeat the steps we have done so far with the second half of the cookie dough. When you have baked all of your cookies, the last step is to make the recommended but optional glaze. Now, to make the glaze, it's really simple. But before applying the glaze, make sure the cookies are completely at room temperature. For the glaze, all you have to do is simply combine the sweetener, which you ground to a fine confectioner powder, and a bit of full-fat cream, and stir to form a smooth, velvety consistency. There's many ways to glaze your cookie, but what I like to do is to pour my glaze into a piping bag with a very small opening like this. Or if you don't have a piping bag or don't want, just use a spoon to drizzle the glaze on top of the cookies. Here again you have an option. You can drizzle in a zigzag pattern over the cookie, or like some people prefer, drop a bit of glaze in the center of the cookie and then smooth it out over the surface. Whichever way you decorate, I'm sure it will be absolutely delicious. Because I want the cookies to harden, I'm going to transfer the glazed cookies onto a tray and put in the refrigerator for a few minutes. 5 minutes should do it. This will help the glaze to harden much faster. And that's all there is to making these amazing cookies. And all you have left to do is to decide how many cookies you'll enjoy and to serve them with your favorite beverage. Now, the last tip I'd like to share with you is how to store extra cookies. You can, of course, put them in your refrigerator for a few extra days, but if you want to save them for a longer period or make them ahead for holidays such as Christmas, all you have to do is one of two things. First, bake the cookies and decorate them with the glaze as described. When chilled, put them in a freezer-safe, airtight container, or at the dough stage where you've cut them into medallions, put them into a freezer-safe, airtight container, placing a sheet of parchment between each layer of dough. And don't forget to label and date your container. I hope that all of these tips, and especially this recipe, is something that you'll enjoy. If you like my channel, the best way that you can support my channel is to, of course, give it a like and leave a comment, but share this link with someone that you think might also enjoy the recipe. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch my video, and please come back when I post my next video. Until next time, I hope you have a very happy and healthy day. Cheers!